Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic. Today, we're going to try something a little different, and we're going to talk about the history of T-Rex, or maybe how we perceive T-Rex through the times.
First Tyrannosaurus rex officially described was discovered in the Hell Creek Formation in Montana in 1902 by Barnum Brown and Richard Lull. They dug out 36 bones, including a lower jaw, a femur, a few vertebrae, and the pubic bone. All of them were so massive that Henry Field Osborn, the scientist who described it and gave it its name, said, "I propose to make this animal the type of the new genus Tyrannosaurus," in reference to its size, which greatly exceeds that of any carnivorous land animal hitherto described. I'm sure he sounded just like that.
So it was Osborn's colleague, William D. Matthews, who got to be the first to ever illustrate Tyrannosaurus rex in 1905. To have that feather in your cap.
The body was very upright, almost like a kangaroo, with a tail that would drag on the ground when it walked, and tiny little legs that probably wouldn't help it run very fast. But hey, it was the first ever attempt at figuring out what they looked like based on a specimen that was only about 10% complete.
Honestly, this is the first T-Rex ever drawn, and I've seen worse, really, and much more modern. I'd say that they've done an amazing job considering what they were working with. You can see in the illustration that they've colored in a little darker all the bones that they actually found. And that's exactly what they were working with. You know, some parts of the legs, some parts of the pubis, the jaw, an arm, and some vertebrae. So everything else is kind of extrapolation off of other things that we kind of knew about. But everything back then was gray area in terms of knowledge in paleontology. So, you know, the tail, that was all estimated. The rest of that, the hips, just a guess. But what really surprises me is that they did associate that arm with the rest of the skeleton. It must have been, you know, pretty obvious that it belonged to just one individual and that it wasn't mixed in with a bunch of other bones of other creatures. Because if it were me, I would have seen this tiny arm and assumed that it was a baby or a totally different animal's arm that got mixed in. But no, they worked out what kind of crazy anatomy this animal must have had to have tiny little arms and gigantic bones. Yeah. It's incredible.
In 1906, Osborn used other fossils for extra context, and L.M. Sterling produced an updated version of the illustration.
So the same skeleton and generally the same pose. But as you can see, this one here is a lot more detailed. He used a more traditional anatomical illustration style, and this is something that I still use in my work. And you can also see that he has scaled these bones to each other a little more carefully. So I think this was after having a year of spending a lot of time around these bones. This was more than just coloring in a general map. This was detailing what is present and, you know, what was assumed to be there for the rest of the skeleton.
But of course, these are just skeletons. What we want to see is how people imagined the muscles, the skin, and the integument that covered them. It was only 10 years later when the museum commissioned the legendary Charles Knight to paint a full version of the T-Rex based on their fossils. The result was this.
Okay, this one is a classic. Charles R. Knight. He is one of my own paleo art heroes. I mean, anyone who does this kind of thing reveres his work. T-Rex at the time was really perceived as a gargantuan reptile. And it's interesting to see what kind of current influences were used for depicting this animal. And you can actually point it out pretty easily. Some of the biggest reptiles we have today are iguanas. If you look at the way the mouth and the cheek are reconstructed in this piece, like that big cheek scale, that's an iguana. Even the way that the mouth closes, the way that there's lips on it, like scaly lips, just like an iguana. We're gonna come back to that later because the lips is a hot topic. But even the scales on the body, the color green, the stripy tail, All of that screams iguana, and this trend lasted for a long time.
It still had all the major issues of the skeleton-only illustrations, plus one little added mistake. Charles, who had been drawing other theropods, added a third finger onto the T-Rex, assuming that T-Rex would have the same number of fingers as its cousins. Logical enough to me. Despite having an incorrect number of fingers, this painting rocked the nation's socks off and was the inspiration for the 1918 film, The Ghost of Slumber Mountain, where a T-Rex fights a Triceratops.
All right, so next, we've got Dinosaurs Go to the Movies, and this is gonna be T-Rex's big debut on the silver screen. And it was silver screen back then, because this is 1918. So let's give this a little watch. It's a stop motion animation. Oh, you've got Triceratops just walking around, bumping things with their giant horns. You know, that's the classic T-Rex, dragging his tail around, lumbering about. Kind of a slow, powerful predator. He looks so smug, always licking his chops. It's like my cat. This isn't important or anything, but the little like licking his chops on the side thing, probably couldn't do that. I know it's pedantic, but the hyoid bone, so that's the bone that supports the tongue, that was found in one of T-Rex's cousins, Eutyrannus. And based on the studies done on that, it was indicated that they probably couldn't stick out their tongue. So it was used for internal manipulation and helping to hold on to prey and other things. And obviously shoving food down its throat. But licking its chops, probably not.
The Ghost of Slumber Mountain was a massive hit and made $100,000 in the box office on a budget of $3,000. In today's terms, that's roughly a $2 million return on a $60,000 investment. The T-Rex was the main attraction, and a star was born.
So after that movie, T-Rex managed to get a few more minor roles into some other lower budget productions. But it wasn't until 1933 that Tyrannosaurus Rex was featured on the big screen. We're talking worldwide blockbuster, 1933's King Kong. So let's watch a clip of that. So like the scales on T-Rex here, they're very detailed, and I gotta say they look almost more crocodilian than iguanodon-y. Is that a word? It is now. So, you know, the idea of T-Rex was continuing to evolve. And maybe, I think around this time we were starting to think of crocodilians as a closely related group to dinosaurs. Oh no! Oh, this is brutal. Ooh. And King Kong broke its jaw. And he's playing with it because of course he is. So for a lot of people around the world, I'd say most people, this was their first view of T-Rex. Because if they weren't keeping up with scientific publications, which wasn't easy at the time, no internet, or they couldn't go to the AMNH, then they really couldn't see T-Rex, you know? So for them, this is what imprinted on everyone's mind when you would say T-Rex. It was this big blockbuster movie. King Kong was no small production either. It cost about $600,000, but it made about $10 million in revenue, which in today's world would be about $250 million. Totally worth the investment. So who do you think would win? One T-Rex or 100 regular-sized gorillas? Let me know in the comments.
7 years later, in 1940, the bar was officially raised by no other than Walt Disney Productions.
This is Disney's Fantasia. And this film is one of my favorites, and I drove my family absolutely crazy watching this daily for probably a couple years as a kid. I was one of those. So what really sets this film apart from everything that came before is that they consulted with an actual paleontologist to advise on the look and the movement and just the whole aspect of how these dinosaurs would move and live. Well, they're so dynamic. Oh my goodness, look at these plodding long necks. Well, that's weird. So there's a bunch of animals here that like, maybe they went through a warp hole and landed all in one place to fight to the death. Because a lot of these animals did not coexist at the same time or place. One of my favorite like little facts in paleontology is that we live closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex lived to Stegosaurus. And here we have them fighting, and oh my gosh, it's so good. It's such a dynamic battle, but this never could have happened. So the T-Rex, as usual, is still green. It is also still the very ferocious predator that we've been seeing all along, but maybe even more ferocious by the fact that you see its teeth at all times. Up until now, we've been seeing the kind of iguana-style scaly lips that cover the teeth, and obviously when he opens his jaw, then you see them. So one of the big design changes we're seeing here in this T-Rex, like yes, it's still a green tail dragger that's really upright and kind of looks like a man in a suit, but it's lipless. So we're no longer going with the iguanodon, scaly lips kind of look. This one here, you see his teeth out at all times, whether he's gnashing or roaring.
In the painting world, Rudolf Zallinger painted a mural called The Age of Reptiles for the Yale Peabody Museum.
So around the same time that Disney's Fantasia came out, there was a lot of paleo art that was starting to pop up. And sometimes the trends in reconstructing T-Rex were pretty variable. Some of them already looked antiquated by this time.
The T-Rex was included as a gigantic but seemingly slow and awkward beast. Its skin was like that of a lizard, and it seemed like it walked around with its tail on the ground.
I do love the big beefy leg. The big beefy leg, it's like big, strong, powerful. But then it's got like this big balloon gut. It's interesting. It's definitely got its charm, don't get me wrong. I love Salinger's work. And yet at the same time, along with Disney's Fantasia, Charles Knight made another painting of T-Rex. And this time, the prompt might have been, what's the coolest thing you can imagine ever happening in the history of the world? And so he painted two T-Rexes fighting. Now these T-Rexes, they are looking a little more forward-thinking. I'd say that they're following the more dynamic and less lumbering kind of idea of what a T-Rex would move like. What I find a little weird about this one, though, is the long, snaky whip tail, which we have no idea. Maybe, I can't remember, but maybe at that point we might not have had a full T-Rex tail. We have that now, but at this point in time, I'm gonna guess we didn't. So they were still using kind of the kangaroo tail, but this one's snaky.
This idea of the T-Rex stayed the same until the 70s, a period we called the Dinosaur Renaissance. A paleontologist named John Ostrom suggested that dinosaurs weren't sluggish lizards, but rather smart and fast-moving beasts, more closely related to birds than to iguanas, and that they might be social, unlike most modern reptiles. His colleague, Robert Bacher, went even further, arguing that they were warm-blooded animals. These new ideas led to a little obscure book from 1990 that was then adapted into a tiny movie called Jurassic Park.
This movie changed how we think of dinosaurs in all the ways. Not only were they, sustaining their image as being gigantic, terrifying movie monsters, but they were getting smarter and faster. All of this is kind of a reflection of a total change in how we perceive dinosaurs at the time. It's known as the Dinosaur Renaissance, where we were associating dinosaurs more closely in evolution to birds. So birds are fast, they're intelligent, they are, much more active than, say, a lizard, for example. The Jurassic Park T-Rex is also showing that the way that we think of T-Rex's teeth is starting to change as well. Because you can see that it's got kind of like a gummy flap around its mouth. So you could call them lips, you could debate that one way or another, but it's no longer exactly like the bare teeth all the way out like a crocodile anymore. So this vision of the T-Rex, it stuck around for a long time. I'd say a lot of people still think this is the standard of T-Rex. And who can blame them? It looks totally amazing.
Jurassic Park was released soon after two well-preserved specimens, Wankel and Sue, were discovered. These were the two most complete specimens found up to that point. It was such a big deal that even penguins went to see them. Later, biomechanical studies showed that this was very likely an overcorrection. The T-Rex was a big predator and mostly walked and ran with its body in a horizontal position, like a T, and it was probably not very agile.
In 1999, the BBC released Walking with Dinosaurs, the original one, I mean. And to this day, this is still what most people look to for a litmus test of is a nature documentary about dinosaurs good or not. They are all still compared to this standard. So this is showing a T-Rex who's fighting an Ankylosaurus in probably the Hell Creek Formation, because that's where they lived at the time. And so this is definitely approaching it from a more naturalistic, factual point of view, using science and sticking to it as best they could to create a narrative that would, inspire people to watch. And what this documentary was really doing differently from everything else we've shown before is that they were framing it like an actual nature documentary, trying to show it, as a real day in the life of these animals, the same way that we might depict lions on the Serengeti. Hey, kitty. Now, jumping all the way to 2023, we've got Apple TV's Prehistoric Planet 2, which is showing something that wasn't really depicted in media before. We've got a fuzzy T-Rex. Another big difference that we're seeing is that this is no longer about trying to create a movie monster to terrify people. They are terrifying in their own right as natural creatures. Showing their own proposed behavior is, in a lot of ways, more fascinating to a lot of people than something that's just, born to trample.
The debate over whether T-Rex had feathers had heated up since 1996, when a theropod called Sinosauropteryx was confirmed to have had feathers. The feathered Caudipteryx and Protoarchaeopteryx were discovered soon after, suggesting this was a common adaptation in theropods, especially among smaller species. In most dinosaurs, feathers were likely used for insulation rather than flight, and this insulation would have been particularly useful to smaller dinos who didn't have the hardware for flight. Then in 2012, Eutyrannus, a large theropod and a close but older relative of T-Rex, was discovered to have had feathers, similar to those of an emu. This added weight to the idea that T-Rex might have had feathers, at least on parts of its body or during certain stages of its life.
But by this point, it's totally valid to start exploring, what a feathered T-Rex could look like. In the past several years, there's been a lot of studies and evidence that both advocate for and against the idea of T-Rex having feathers. Now, some of that is the idea that maybe the smaller tyrannosaurids and theropods would probably have some kind of feathers, but they would lose the need for that insulation the larger they got, which is something that you see in mammals today. But dinosaurs were different beasts. Some of the evidence that we've found against the feathery T-Rex theory is that we have fossilized skin impressions of T-Rex from different parts of the body. The idea is that these scales, they wouldn't be able to occupy the same space as the structures necessary to be feathery. So those fossils hint at them being scaly, not feathery.
We still don't know whether T-Rex had feathers, but since many of its relatives did, it's considered likely that it had at least some. It's possible that they were only present during juvenile stages or limited to certain areas of the body. What we did get some closure on is the whole lip debate. We're now pretty sure that the teeth weren't exposed like those of a croc.
In 2023, a new paper came out in Science by Cullen et al. Talking about teeth development and how enamel works in teeth. both in dinosaurs and in extant animals. What was found is that T-Rex probably had lips, or at least some kind of tissue covering the teeth, because it turns out that enamel breaks down when it's exposed to air, so it needs to stay sealed in with lots of saliva. I'd like to talk about the Tyrannosaurus Rex that I got to reconstruct and paint. This is the Black Beauty T-Rex. This is a famous one here in Canada. It's a fairly complete skeleton, and it's called Black Beauty because its bones are pitch black. I got to reconstruct this for the Fukui Prefectural Dinosaur Museum in Japan, and this ended up being part of their dinosaur exhibit all about the North American Cretaceous. And it was a huge honor to do that. So they didn't want a feathery T-Rex, and that's fine and perfectly scientifically acceptable. Either way, right now we don't have enough evidence one way or another, but I'm excited to know what's going to come next. So there's going to be a lot of physical differences between my reconstruction and what was done in the early 1900s. For example, it was in a much more horizontal position, still very capable of rearing up and raising its head, but its body's balance was more centered around the hips, and the tail and the head would balance each other out a little bit. The tail itself is definitely not dragging. It's holding itself up nice and firm. There's a lot of muscles that run all the way down the tail. If you did like a cross section of that tail, it would be way more round than flat, like we used to see in the early 1900s. And finally, we're going to take a look at the latest depiction of T-Rex. And that's with BBC Earth's Walking with Dinosaurs. Not the 1999 one, this is 2025. It came out last week. I haven't seen this yet. I've been saving it for this moment. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, look at all that integument all over its head. It's got some keratin patches over the eyes. Its mouth is sealed shut. I love that the first thing they show you isn't a T-Rex with his mouth wide open. Yeah, this looks like a natural animal. Yeah, and just like in my illustration, you can see that, its spine is held much more horizontal than it used to be. And even so, it doesn't look like it's going to tip over because its muscles and bones are well distributed for its weight. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm excited to see more of this. I think I'm gonna have to go binge this tonight. So I want to be upfront here that there is so much research out there on T-Rex. It might be the best known dinosaur of all time. And if you wanted to try and track all the evidence for and against things like lips or scales or feathers, you'd be bouncing around the internet from one paper to another for hours. We couldn't exactly encapsulate all of that here, so we're giving you the short notes, but we're trying to do it justice.
Larger than a T-Rex, and able to catch fish the size of bison. This ferocious predator from the Cretaceous is one of the most mysterious and controversial dinosaurs to ever live. Its secrets are only starting to be uncovered. This is the Spinosaurus. Today, we're delving into dangerous Cretaceous waters and discussing one of the biggest bones of contention in the dino world. What did Spinosaurus look like? The story of Spinosaurus starts in 1915, when a German paleontologist named Ernst Stromer discovered the known fossils of a theropod with 1.6 meter long and very narrow lower jaws and long spines coming out of its backbone. Wanting to be as descriptive as possible, he named it Spinosaurus and sent the fossils to the Bavarian State Collection of Paleontology in Munich, where it was estimated to be about 97 million years old. But during World War II, the fossils were destroyed during a bombing of the city. For decades, illustrations of these few bones were all we had. So Spinosaurus was imagined as a 16-meter-long T-Rex with a croc-like face and a back sail. Basically the coolest dino of all time. This was the last time that we had a unified vision of this dino, and everyone was happy. But then we started finding more fossils, and the paleo community started breaking into factions. In the 1980s, a new similar species was discovered. It was called the Baryonyx. It had huge claws and showed that these were part of a family of dinosaurs, which was then named the Spinosauridae. These related species helped scientists piece together what Spinos would have looked like a little better, and cemented their place as one of the largest theropods ever known. The long snout suggested a fish-heavy diet, and the huge claws would have helped it grab prey close to the shore. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, we kept finding fossils, which contradicted our early perceptions of Spinos. It's like reading a book in reverse and understanding less and less as the pages turn. First of all, their hind legs were revealed to be extremely short compared to other theropods like T-Rex. They would make Spinos awkward and slow walkers, but might have been an adaptation for life in the water. They could have helped it swim like a crocodilian, and since they already had a croc-like face and likely ate fish, it would have made sense to spend more time in the water than other dinos. The bones were also more dense than in other theropods, which in other animals is used for buoyancy control. This is a bigger deal than it sounds like. Up until this point, there had been no indications of aquatic dinosaurs. Other aquatic creatures of the time, like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, are technically not dinosaurs. It was weird. And then, tail vertebrae were discovered. The tail was revealed to be long, narrow, and flat, like the tail of an axolotl, which would have helped Spinosaurus propel itself in the water. Long and strong toe bones, similar to those found in modern shorebirds, suggested that they have the ability to walk in muddy or silty soil. They could have even been webbed, but unfortunately, we have no evidence of that. There is also evidence that they had pressure receptors along the snout, much like crocodilians. And then, the discovery of a large number of teeth in river environments suggested that they could have spent a lot of time, maybe all of their time, in the water. Of course, that would have been way too easy a conclusion for this debate. Evidence for a more land-based lifestyle also started mounting. Body reconstruction suggested it couldn't really stand upright in the water without tipping over unless it was moving forward. The tail also seemed too weak to be used for propulsion as effectively as a crocodilian does. It also would have been too massive and awkward a swimmer to pursue prey underwater. The sail and tail may not have been for balance and propulsion respectively, but rather a display for sexual selection, like a peacock's tail. Or it could have been a structure for a thermoregulatory organ like elephant ears, or maybe even fat deposits, like a bison's hump. So depending on how you see it, it could have been an aquatic predator behaviorally similar to a croc, or a wading predator like a grizzly bear, who specialized in fish but could venture to land and eat carrion, or catch prey opportunistically. The whole issue is complicated by the fact that only 6 specimens have ever been found, and they've all been incomplete and of different ages and sizes. Making an accurate model has been difficult. Kind of like trying to solve a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but you only have 6 pieces. Every sail vertebra ever found is broken, and we don't know how long they were, or if they created an arc or an M-shaped structure, or what its purpose was. We don't even know how powerful and propulsive the tail was. We don't know if when it walked on land, it moved like a bear with the ability to stand on its hind legs, or more like a pangolin, using its tail to balance while walking on 2 feet. We don't know how good of a swimmer it was, but we do know that it liked to eat fish and spend a lot of time near the water fishing. We know it was huge, and more importantly, that it was one of the coolest animals to ever live. So please, if you're out looking for fossils in the deserts of northern Africa, we need you to help us get closer to solving this puzzle. Until we do, it will continue to cause fights on paleo subreddits, provoke academic beefs, and break families of paleontologists apart.
A river monster who could take on dinosaurs and fish the size of great white sharks. Their cousins walk among us, but we're just beginning to understand them. A giant killer among giants. This is the Sarcosuchus. Around 120 million years ago, there lived a creature that made even the dinosaurs tremble. The Sarcosuchus lived in the rivers of Gondwana, which later split into South America and Africa. This croc-like creature wasn't really a crocodilian, but belonged to a related clade called Pholidosauridea. But for comparison purposes, let's take a moment to talk about the saltwater crocodile. These behemoths can get up to 6 meters in length and weigh over 1,000 kilograms. They can catch and eat prey as large as gaurs and water buffaloes. They're the largest living reptiles on the planet today. But this modern giant would seem like a little lizard next to the mighty Sarcosuchus, who scientists believe could have been up to 12 meters long and weighed over 4,000 kilograms. There still is a bit of uncertainty on their size because there are no complete fossils of this ancient beast. All we have are estimates based on the size of their skull and their hip bones. But even the most conservative calculations put it at least 50% longer and 3 times heavier than the largest living crocodilians. The snout of a juvenile was over a meter long, and it was relatively narrow with a bump at the end, similar to the Indian gharial. Its shape tells us that they mostly fed on fish for the first several years of their lives. Narrow snouts are more hydrodynamic than broader ones, so it takes less force to rapidly open and close them underwater. Their prey is bitten and swallowed in the blink of an eye. As they got older, their snout got wider and their diet became more varied. This type of transformation is not seen in modern crocodilians, but supported a life where they started out eating fish and then would get big enough to catch prey outside of the water. Their eyes could only move up and down, so we can deduce that they would hang out near the shore, just waiting for the right moment to snap at whatever came their way. They're a dangerous business, so to protect themselves, Sarcosuchus had a thick layer of bony scales all the way from their neck to the middle of their tails. It was a nightmare in shining armor. Even though they could eat more things as adults, fish were still a viable option. One of their likely prey was a giant riverfish called Mawsonia, a coelacanth-like leviathan that could reach 6 meters in length, about the same size as Bruce from Jaws. Getting this big and deadly could take decades. And sometimes we can tell the age of a fossil animal by cutting a thin section of their bone and counting the lines of arrested growth. Kind of like the growth rings you count on the inside of a tree trunk. These lines are formed when the animal's metabolism slows down dramatically, usually during the winter. So in effect, each line represents a year of age. A fossil of one Sarcosuchus individual, estimated to have died at 80% of its maximum potential size, was found to have been about 40 years old based on these growth lines. So from this, we can extrapolate that they reached their full monstrous size at about 60 years of age. There's still a lot left to learn about this magnificent species. We've only discovered a handful of fossils, but excavations are ongoing. Their fossils are mostly found in deserts in remote areas of North Africa. Some of the most recent discoveries took place in Tatooine, Tunisia, a place that was the shooting location for a famous desert planet in a somewhat popular space opera. It's wild to think that that area was once a lush forest. But hey, the Earth changes, and those changes are what make evolution happen.
The Velociraptor has changed a lot. In just the few decades since Jurassic Park made it one of the most popular dinos in the world, there have been lots of scientific discoveries that have changed how we picture it. Let's go on a tour of the Velociraptor's family glow-up, or glow down if you like the classic look.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I forgot about this guy.
This is how Velociraptors went from bipedal genius lizards to giant killer chickens.
Today we're going to talk about Velociraptor and some other dromaeosaurids and how we've perceived them through time.
When you think of dinosaurs, one of the first names that comes to mind is Velociraptor. Sharp teeth, dagger feet, and probably a pretty bad attitude. If you're afraid of geese or even cassowaries, this was an animal that would spook you out of your undergarments. And yet, despite their current fame, their whole family, the dromaeosaurids, were basically ignored for decades after their discovery. So let's take a look at the whole family and see how our vision of them has changed over time, and how they have been at the forefront of what we think of dinosaurs as a whole.
All right, so let's take a peek at the first fossils of Velociraptor that were ever found. Oh, what a beauty. So I've only ever seen a cast of this skull, but this is like the Velociraptor skull that you probably all imagine if you've ever seen a Velociraptor skull. Since then, there's been others collected, but this is the iconic one. It's a little surprising that this didn't make a bigger splash at the time because look at this thing. It doesn't really look familiar like any other creature that we have alive today. Kind of bird-like, kind of lizardy. All dromaeosaur, baby.
The earliest fossils of this family go back to the 1920s. Velociraptor mongoliensis was discovered in, you guessed it, Mongolia. It was described by Henry Fairfield Osborn in 1924 based on its skull and claws. He was the same guy who named the Tyrannosaurus Rex, a real dino marketing genius. At the time, they just assumed they were basically small versions of more well-known theropods, like T-Rex and Allosaurus. Those first fossils led to the very first scientific illustrations of a dromaeosaurid.
Oh, wow. Okay, so here's a beautiful, classic scientific illustration of the skull and the claw as described by Osborn. Yeah, this is all the material that they had at the time, so it was probably extremely difficult to try and imagine what kind of creature this came from. You know, today, we have claws that look similar to this. There's cat claws, bear claws, even eagle talons look a fair bit like this. But the size and shape of this is basically unseen until now. And this skull, if it belonged to this skull, good luck filling in the blanks. You know, other dinosaur claws had been found, but these are very, very distinctive. Something only dromaeosaurs have is that sickle claw. And, you know, at the time they thought, well, this is just dino scissor hands.
And that made sense at the time. You don't see a lot of modern animals with feet daggers, unless you look at birds. But we were a few decades from that.
And that's basically the story of dromaeosaurs and Velociraptor until 1969. Velociraptor didn't have the rich history of being a movie star throughout the 1900s like T-Rex did. Really, he was definitely an underground kind of star. But don't worry, his time is gonna come.
In 1969, John Ostrom described a new dino called Deinonychus, based on fossils his team had discovered 5 years earlier. This discovery led to the first reconstruction of the dromaeosaurids we fell in love with.
Oh, now this is the real deal. Or at least it was back in 1969. This illustration is by Robert Bacher, also known as Bob Bacher, who is one of the most famous paleontologists in America. So this here is a representation of Deinonychus, who's a cousin of Velociraptor in the same family. And looks like they've definitely filled in a lot of blanks because we've got everything from snout to tip of the tail. You can see instead of being a big lumbering lizard down on all fours and dragging its tail, this one is up and alert and sprightly and sprinting, and that tail is just like a rod that's creating balance for its entire body, and it is moving fast, you can see. And now we know what that big ol' sickle claw's doing. Outstanding. So I do have to say that this is pretty typical of the time as far as dinosaur interpretations would go, because instead of being covered in scales, it's kind of got like a lot of like skin folds, and it looks like a naked chicken. But at least we're getting closer to chicken. In fact, you even see that it's got a cloaca. And it's funny actually, because the one fossilized cloaca that we have, it's not from this group of dinosaurs, it's a protoceratopsid. And that's the only fossilized cloaca we have, but it actually looks a lot like what you see here, including, okay, I'm gonna stop talking about his cloaca. Okay, I'm done.
Beyond telling where the claws actually went, just the fact that it looked like a sprinter put our understanding of them in overdrive. Sprinting takes a lot of energy and a high metabolism. Did that mean that they were warm-blooded? And the posture and claws were surprisingly bird-like. So connections were being made.
So in 1993, the best dinosaur movie to ever be made was released. And it had some pretty great Deinonychus depictions. Let's have a look. And by the way, this is called Carnosaur. Don't show your kids, but you do need to see it. Oh my God, that's amazing. Like, yeah, he's definitely not just a guy in a suit. Did you see how his lips were like curling up at the sides? So this might be a little bit of a step back 50 years to the man in a suit dinosaur depiction, but man, it's got 90s style all across it. And for that, I love it. But also, how many dinosaur movies are depicting Deinonychus specifically? Props to this movie. Seriously. They did their research and did nothing with it.
The same year, Steven Spielberg released Jurassic Park. Do we really need to say anything about it? That movie is simply undeniable.
Crazy to think that that's the precursor to what we all know and love. And if you don't, then why are you watching this video? Now, who could possibly be opening this door? Oh my God! Looking a little less like a man in a suit over here. We've got Jurassic Park. Now these raptors, as you all know, I don't need to tell you, you already all know this, that these are called Velociraptors despite clearly being Utah raptor sized. But when it comes to the movie, you know, things get a little changed and edited and inflated. So you've got a Utah raptor sized Deinonychus called Velociraptor. Because that's just how things go sometimes. And you can kind of understand why without even asking. Velociraptor just sounds cool. Go Raptors. I can tell you, and I know a lot of paleontologists because I've been working in a paleontology lab for over 10 years, that a lot of dinosaur researchers these days were indeed inspired by Jurassic Park. So say what you want about their inaccuracies, they've still inspired an entire generation, and I bet you own at least one t-shirt.
This look was iconic, but the next big development in paleontology was just around the corner.
In 1999, we got the first definitive evidence of Maniraptor and dinosaurs having feathers. And this does mean Velociraptor too. So this is Sinosauropteryx. It's a mouthful, but it's also a feather. But that is kind of just a classic death pose for theropods. Ugh. It almost looks like it was alive yesterday and got run over by a truck.
Beyond showing us that some dinosaurs had feathers, this fossil proved that they weren't originally intended for flight, but for insulation or as a display. That meant that even larger dinos that couldn't fly could still have feathers. And it was concrete proof that birds are modern-day dinosaurs.
And just 1 year later, in the year 2000, we got Microraptor. Now this was a 4-winged dromaeosaurid dinosaur. Oh wow. This is just like, what if angels were real but also a dinosaur? That's how you get Microraptor. There's such an interesting question of like, how would this animal move? Could they truly flap and fly? There are a lot of like physical demonstration and models that have been developed to test their flight abilities and whether, they had to jump from high up in a tree, or if they could take off from land. And these guys in particular, among the dromaeosaurid family, I think they're extremely fascinating.
And not only were they incredibly cool, these fossils were also screaming at us, "Oi, dinos could fly, and birds are dinos." The feathers were asymmetrical, which is something we see today in birds. They also had hollow bones and iridescent black feathers, like a starling. The bird connection was clear.
We don't have any other vertebrates that have 4 wings. This is something that dinosaurs tried, and it ultimately failed, but they're the only ones who did try it.
So how did pop culture react to these groundbreaking discoveries? Unenthusiastically.
All right, we're gonna watch a clip from Jurassic Park 3. Ooh. So you see he's got quills, or spines, I suppose, down his head. And so these raptors are looking more decorated, you could say. I'm a fan of some speculative biology and speculative anatomy. Like, have you looked at a chicken before? They're covered in all kinds of strange structures that wouldn't preserve with the bones anyway. You'd never guess. But yeah, so this is as far as they went with Velociraptor, with trying to represent the presence of feathers in this group of dinosaurs. I think it would have been a little more interesting, at least to me, and I think to a lot of people, if they had tried to reflect some of the current knowledge. Because in the first Jurassic Park, they really did try and reflect what was known at the time. But, cinema!
But then, in the year 2007, quill knobs, little bumps in the bone where some feathers attached to, were found in a fossil of a velociraptor. That's it. Velociraptor and its cousins had feathers. There was no longer any controversy, right? In 2013, Walking with Dinosaurs 3D showed Troodon, a close relative of the dromaeosaurids, in a very bird-like fashion.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I forgot about this guy. Oh, look at him. He's just a little chicken. Oh, he's beautiful and I love him. Walking with Dinosaurs 3D. Oh, I love this depiction, honestly. It's so fun. And they actually covered Troodon in feathers. It's beautiful. Still went with a scaly snout, but hey, vultures are naked on the front. Why not? So we don't know exactly why dromaeosaurids had these big feathers on their arms, but at least we know at this point now that they had them, and that's cool. I love it.
Okay, so was it time for the Jurassic Park franchise to catch up to dromaeosaurid research?
Jurassic World 2015, the originator of everybody's favorite Velociraptor meme format. And these Velociraptors are looking as lizardy as ever. But now they're just leaning into it. Like, they've established their universe and decided, well, this is what we're running with. Let's just get weirder. They're definitely leaning into the idea that these animals are intelligent. And this is more of a mammalian kind of behavior. that's kind of interesting because, you know, the idea is that dromaeosaurids were pretty smart as far as dinosaurs go. Why wouldn't they have been a little bit social?
In 2022, they would course correct a little, finally showing a feathered dromaeosaurid. But it was unfortunately not a velociraptor. This was Jurassic Park Dominion.
All right, Jurassic World now. We've got everybody's favorite feathered depiction of raptors in the Jurassic World. And this scene, like, I'm not gonna lie, I ended up laughing pretty intensely because Pyroraptor just like digs into the ice and comes bursting through it like it was fluid. Oh my goodness. So it's basically like, okay, we gave it feathers, but now it's gonna be a killer penguin. This is great movie monster stuff though, like, so for that, also the name, Pyroraptor, sounds even better than Velociraptor. Raptor of fire. Except this is like Raptor of ice, so I don't know. It's fine. I'm just happy that the franchise decided to actually do a feathered dinosaur.
But the same year, we got treated to possibly the greatest Velociraptor ever put on screen.
Oh, wow. Now that is a killer claw. To this day, I still think this might be the most scientifically accurate Velociraptor ever depicted, and I am a huge fan of it. It is beautiful, but also the fact that we've kind of discovered the extent of keratin that sheaths around the bone of that killer claw. And in claws in general, there's been a lot of discoveries that show just how much bigger the claw would have been on top of that bone. I've seen some myself. Sometimes it's like an extra third of the length is just keratin. And I think that this is actually showing that really nicely. That thick layer of keratin that tapers towards the point, absolutely terrifying.
And finally, we have 2025's Walking with Dinosaurs.
This is Utahraptor versus Gastonia. And finally, Utahraptor gets to be the star. Not only is it the biggest dromaeosaurid that we know about right now, I love that it's not moving its head, like its body is moving, but it's keeping its head perfectly stable, which is a very bird-like thing to do. You ever seen, or have you ever held a chicken and done this with its body, but its head stays in exactly one place? This Utahraptor is doing the same thing, and that's really cool. So Utahraptor is estimated to be up to 500 kilograms. And yeah, that is huge and really big. But Gastonia is estimated to be around 2,000 kilograms. So that's 4 times its weight. And it has the bonus of being low to the ground, supported by 4 legs instead of 2 legs. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying Utahraptor pushing over a Gastonia. So there you have it. This is the history of how we've seen dromaeosaurs and Velociraptor through time. Pop culture has given us a little bit of everything, but science and new discoveries get us closer and closer to what they probably looked like every day. Today, we're going to talk about a creature that's taken on so many different forms and probably has many more to go. That's right, we're going to talk about T-Rex's nemesis, Spinosaurus.
Just a heads up, this creature has a long and tangled scientific history. And this is just a short version of that and how it's been depicted. So if you need more specifics about the science, definitely dig in. And check out our episode on Spinosaurus while you're at it.
So let's take a look at the very first fossils of Spinosaurus that were ever found. These were from 1912 and discovered by Richard Markgraf. So the bones that were found, by no means was this a complete skeleton, but it did seem like they all went together. But these were the weirdest fossils of a theropod dinosaur that anyone had found so far.
In 1915, Ernst Stromer published these fossils. It had a super long, narrow jaw and long protruding dorsal spines down its back. hence Spinosaurus. Despite being in pieces, it was so weird that it deserved to become the founding member of its very own new clade, the Spinosauridae.
I'm gonna guess that the only way that they knew that it was theropod was because of the association of other bones that it was with. Even the teeth that you can see in this illustration, they're so conical and round and robust that they look a whole lot more like a crocodilian than a dinosaur. And we'll be coming back to that later. And then we have this photograph of the vertebrae that were collected, and they put them in, you know, what they assumed would be the best plausible order. And you can see just how crazy tall those dorsal spines are, hence the name Spinosaurus. He's one spiny boy.
In 1936, Stromer made a reconstruction of Spinosaurus, trying to make sense of all the bones that were ever collected so far. It leaned pretty conservative because other large theropods were all we had to go by at the time.
So at this point, we still didn't have a face, but we knew it had a long, strong chin, some conical, pointy teeth, and it was a tall-spined theropod. But we all started to wonder the important questions, like, could it win in a fight against T-Rex?
These bones were utterly lost to history during World War II, when the museum where they were stored was destroyed. Photographs were rediscovered in the 1990s and published in 2006, and during that time, imaginations and paleontologists ran wild.
Okay, we're gonna jump all the way to 1976 because no one's really cared yet about Spinosaurus. For some reason, it's popping back up, and Giovanni Caselli decided to make this fantastic illustration. This looks like a wiener dog on steroids, and please tell me, where's the lie? So it's already going pretty wild with speculation here, and I love it. I think it's great. The text here on the page is talking about how the sale might have actually helped Spinosaurus lose excess heat and prevent it from overheating, making it a quicker theropod than other, meat eaters at the time.
Considering what they were working with, these illustrations are awesome. They're time capsules. Some of these definitely look more like Dimetrodon, while others don't bother with a sail at all and opt for big protruding spikes. Others, yet again, follow the science published and do a wonderful interpretation of it. Remember that we still only had the Stromer files and some related dinosaurs to go by.
By 1984, researchers were already proposing that Spinosaurus could have had a more croc-like snout to catch fish. And all of that was confirmed when Baryonyx walkeri was discovered.
This is when we found that the Spino family was bigger than we ever knew. The Baryonyx was pieced together from separate fossils discovered in multiple places. Even though it wasn't identical to Spinosaurus, it shared some very important traits. It doubled down on the whole fish-eating thing. The reconstruction was also more complete than what we had of Spinosaurus. It had more parts of the rest of the body and some kinda average-sized dorsal spines. Lots of the skull was discovered, including the little crest up on its forehead. It gave us a glimpse at the true face of Spinosaurus, and began painting a whole family portrait.
I love this Baryonyx paper because it's one of the few scientific research papers that gets a full reconstruction inside the paper itself, and not just, as a cover page or something. So one of the figures is this fantastic painting by John Sibbick. And I love his art, big time fan and big inspiration. He's got this animal looking so naturalistic, and honestly it still holds up really well to what we understand Spinosaurids to be. And that's just it. This was the beginning of the expansion of the Spinosaurid family. So Spinosaurus is no longer living inside its own family all alone. It's got company. I still think that this John Sibbick piece is still one of the best pieces of Spinosaurid art out there. It's honestly just gorgeous. Additional evidence was found when Suchomimus was discovered in Niger. The 1998 documentary Colossal Claw gave us a better glimpse into what scientists were thinking at the time.
This skeleton of Suchomimus, or the croc mimic, was 2/3 complete. And as its name suggests, it had a very croc-like face. So at this point, people were starting to connect the dots. Maybe Spinosaurus also looked just as crocky? Considering the semi-aquatic lifestyle of crocs, was this a case of convergent evolution? And just like Spino, it had long dorsal spines too. The environment it came from was a lush, swampy delta, so there would have been lots of feeding opportunities, both terrestrial and aquatic.
Oh my goodness, that dramatic zoom. That jaw just goes on for days. Oh, I love that extreme wide-angle lens. This is really starting to take shape for what we understand Spinosaurids to look like now, today. You saw the placement of its nostril, it's higher up on the nose. Just 3 years later, Spino gets his first big break on the silver screen as the main antagonist for Jurassic Park 3. He's here to ruin T-Rex's day and is destined to fight him forever. Although they probably never would have crossed paths in reality. Okay, here comes Spinosaurus. See, this is awesome because even if at this point we didn't have everything that we now know about Spinosaurus, this was perfect timing to put him in a movie because we just got Baryonyx and Suchomimus giving us a face. So now we've got this big spiny meanie with that big croc face. I mean, they did a very nice job, actually. We didn't know yet just how tiny their legs were. So the fact that it was this big upright theropod, running with those big long legs, might not hold up today, but I still think that it was a fantastic model. I think that movie gets a lot of hate. Just admit it, you wanted to see T-Rex fight a Spinosaurus. Good job, the movies. Finally, after nearly 100 years of mystery, Spinosaurus's face was finally revealed.
Check out the skeletal reconstruction though. Those legs are looking pretty long still. Something is holding this creature back from its full potential. We just don't know what yet. This is also around the time that old photos of the destroyed specimen were rediscovered in old collections. So everyone got a fresh reminder of where this all began.
So you can see here how this has been cobbled together by the bones of multiple Spinosaurus specimens and Spinosaurus cousins, because they're all like little missing pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. But together, they make a lot of sense in relation to one another. So now we've got the jaw, we've got the snout, we've got the little crest on top. The sail is nice and round and crescent-shaped, just like in Jurassic Park 3, which surely was referring to this. And it's important to remember that all of those spines, sail spines, they're all broken. Every single one of them. None of them that we have are complete. So the order in which they're arranged and the degree to which they get reconstructed is going to change our interpretation. And it will keep changing it. Just wait. Just a year later, in 2006, all of the research gets compiled into one amazing documentary, Land Before Time 12, The Great Day of the Flyers. And if you've seen this movie, then please just know you are one of the real ones. Okay, I grew up on Land Before Time. It's definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. Drove my family insane watching it day after day after day. I am who I am. But even I didn't know that these went up to 12. In fact, like, how many more are there? I'm gonna look that up later, for sure. Oh, wow. Oh, this Spinosaurus is a bit of a chunker. They definitely made them pretty wide and rotund, but they're all basketball shaped. So the sail on the back is actually kind of interesting because it looks more like an accordion fan. I've got one of those for hot days. Just fan yourself with a Spinosaurus? So we just had to go and check this because it's very vital information. There are 14 movies and 26 episodes of a series for Land Before Time. So we've got like 40 things to go and watch. Should we start a podcast watch along? Does that sound fun? I think that sounds great. Let's do it. Yeah. On a slightly more serious note, in 2011, we got BBC's Planet Dinosaur, showing us something that very likely did happen. Spinos fishing. Ooh, looks like they're eating some small theropod. Oh, and Spinosaurus is coming in for the steel. Yeah, so they're kind of pointing out that this spine was probably a bit of a weak point in terms of facing off with other theropods. It's like a big Ruffles chip. Yeah, that looks ketchup flavor. And it's interesting, you see it like moving and walking around. So every time its spine moves, you see it kind of bounce and expand and then contract. And so I don't know like how fixed and stable its spine was. It's plausible. But up to this point, I don't think we've seen underwater Spinosaurus yet. One of the really cool fish from the Kem beds where Spinosaurus is from is called Onchopristis, and it's almost always the meal of choice that Spino goes for in the water, probably because these big skate sharks are really interesting. You know, there's sawfish and all kinds of other interesting things in there too. So we've got Fisherman Spino, the pescatarian dino.
In 2014, Dr. Nizar Ibrahim and his team published the breakthrough that everyone was dreaming of. The first Spinosaurus skeleton since Stromer in 1915. What's more is that it revealed more of the anatomy that the old destroyed skeleton was lacking. It had a few of the vertebrae with the long sail bones, forelimbs, a pelvis, a hind limb, and even some parts of the skull. These new fossils, combined with new technology, gave us the opportunity to look inside the bones. Aquatic or semi-aquatic animals often evolve a higher bone density. Theropods usually have light, airy bones, but Spino bones were dense. Their legs were short, and their wide feet had long, strong bones, letting it walk on muddy, silty soil like a huge shorebird. Short legs made him a short king. The teeth were conical and thick, like a crocodile. This all pointed at a lifestyle that was closer to that of a croc than to a T-Rex, a truly massive crocodino. This made Spinosaurus a star.
Based on these discoveries, Nova released a documentary called Bigger Than T-Rex. Let's take a look at what they did. Oh, now look at that sail. That's very different already, isn't it? Kind of the M-shaped, which actually goes all the way back to Stromer and the way that he interpreted the order of those vertebrae. Wow. So as we can see now, the whole stature and like the way that this animal holds itself is suddenly so different because its whole long sausagey body is way closer to the ground because it doesn't have really long legs. In fact, they were pretty short and stout, which also means that its arms were closer to the ground as well. So they were suggesting that maybe it was able to crawl on those big claws. This documentary was a really big deal at the time. You know, it's unveiling the only individual left of Spinosaurus in terms of like an actual skeleton. And for the first time since the original skeleton was destroyed, we have Spinosaurus to work with again, with all kinds of new stuff. This also got Spinosaurus on the cover of Nat Geo. So the cover and the press release was all done by a good friend and colleague of mine in paleoart named Davide Bonadonna. And he's an incredibly skilled artist who works very closely with the researchers and takes part in it himself. Really, the artwork that he did is outstanding and so detailed and so lifelike. This artwork of Spinosaurus, like, it really is quite wild because we've never seen such a short one. Says theropod, you're thinking, you know, tall, upright, bipedal. Around this time, we were starting to really understand that, like, being bipedal doesn't mean that you're totally upright. So it was maintaining its horizontal body plan, but this time it was closer to the ground. So they're really moving into the direction of presenting this animal as being semi-aquatic. It probably spent a fair bit of its time in the water, you know, and maybe that's part of what facilitated its short-legged life. Gets you closer to the water, maybe it makes you a better swimmer.
2017, Doctors Hone and Holtz write a paper trying to make heads and tails of all the Spinosauridae specimens collected, doing everyone a big favor by organizing all this information for a referral down the line in this tangled Spinoverse. They point out that one of the features of Spinosaurids are their massive claws, and they featured this awesome bit of art by Matt von Ruyen, proposing the claws were for a "come at me, bro" free hugs threat display. Kinda like a croc-faced water anteater.
In 2018, Dr. Don Henderson decided to test this semi-aquatic hypothesis and created a digital model to see if he could make Spino buoyant in its current form. Let's see what he did. I love these figures of these submerged dinosaurs. Just trying to show, like, would they float? This paper really suggests that Spinosaurus was a disaster in the water, that if it wasn't constantly moving forward, then it would roll and tip over and wouldn't be able to hold itself up. It also says that even if it exhaled all the air from its lungs, it would still be too buoyant to sink or go underwater. Too many air sacs. In 2020, the plot thickens yet again because Dr. Ibrahim is back with more Spinosaurus. And this time, he and his team are suggesting that it's the first fully aquatic dinosaur. Let's see what they have. There's actually so much to cover scientifically in this paper, but let's keep it a little short by saying this is Spinosaurus expansion pack. They found more of the Spinosaurus that they published on in 2014. And through extreme serendipity, we're able to recover it from a market and from these fossil sellers and reunite it from the original specimen. It's pretty incredible. And one of my favorite figures from this paper is, of course, the skeletal reconstruction, where we have this wonderfully lifelike and absolutely alien-looking dinosaur. But look at this swimming motion. Look at that tail. So the sail didn't end on its back. Its whole tail also had a sail, kind of like a fluke. So that's how they interpreted it. And this paper was suggesting that it used its tail as a propulsion mechanism to be able to pursue things in the water, to hunt down. With a reconstruction like this, I mean, this looks like a water living animal. Oh, it's fascinating. I'm sure it could fit some pretty big fish in that gullet, you know? Yeah, he could fit that whole scuba diver in his gullet. He fit so many scuba divers in this baby.
Their theory was based on three main ideas. 1. On land, it would have walked on four legs and on its knuckles. Its center of gravity would have been too forward, which would have made it slow and awkward. 2. The tail was shaped like a fin, and it likely helped it propel Spinosaurus when hunting and foraging. And 3. The fossils were all found in coastal or marine environments.
This was further supported by the discovery of a nearly complete tail. So of course, they called upon their buddy Davide Bonadonna once again to make a stunning piece of art. So now we've got a literal Spinosaurus swimsuit edition, and it's a full feature. Like, look at this amazing creature in all of these action poses, hunting all kinds of different fish from its ecosystem. So this piece of art is fantastic. In fact, yeah, look at the sail on the tail. You can tell that it's kind of pushing itself along, and he's going for that Onchopristis because it's always Onchopristis, isn't it? They're pretty cool. Welcome to Spinosaurus Swimsuit Edition, where on the centerfold is a beautiful fold-out featuring full exposed cloaca. Oh, these are so beautiful. I love the colors, the light, the proportions on the animal. I mean, yeah, every one of these poses is a masterpiece. Davida, you've done it again.
The paper even included video of their experiment to see how the tail would move in a water flume. I'd say that's got a pretty nice undulation. Of course, the controversy didn't stop there. Dr. Hone and Dr. Holtz determined that the tail was too weak and the sail was too big for it to be an aquatic pursuit hunter. So they were more likely to be for display, like a peacock tail. Oh look, another different sail interpretation. Funky.
In 2022, Paul Serino and his crew created a fully posable digital model based on CT scan data of Spinosaurus specimens. And this had a full distribution of body mass with muscle, bone, and air sacs. It looked like this. Oh, wow. So yeah, they've actually modeled out different types of materials. So we have the full skeleton in 3D and the soft tissue modeled over and around that, and even some of the muscles inside the body. And each element of this model has been assigned its own mass, its own weight, its own volume, and all of that together, they're able to make slightly more accurate readings or estimates of body mass and size and weight.
The results challenged the three arguments made for the fully aquatic lifestyle. They suggested that it was a stable bipedal animal and too buoyant to swim and dive in deep water. Spinosaurus was probably a land ambush predator and was only semi-aquatic at best.
In 2025, Spinosaurus made another appearance in Walking with Dinosaurs. The new one. Oh, I mean, how often do you get to see Spinosaurus snoozing in the sun, chasing bugs? Oh, wait a sec. So they are really reflecting the current thoughts on Spinosaurus, and they were definitely working quite closely with the researchers who are most involved with Spinosaurus at this point in time. This one's going for a deep dive. And it's going, of course, for poor little Oliver by several researchers, you know. You can kind of compare this bimodal lifestyle to a lot of animals today. Like polar bears, for example. They'll dive in, chase after seals, and catch them if they can. If they spot one from the edge of an ice floe, they're gonna dive in for it. On land, they're gonna go for that as well. Also, in 2025, we get Jurassic World Rebirth. In the preview of this movie, you get to glimpse at Spinosaurus, because of course they bring him back. Or several of them? And they're sticking to the aquatic theory. Well, these ones are definitely going for like the speedboat model. You can tell they're fast because they have racing stripes. But I don't make the rules. It's how it is. They're even showing that they work together to coordinate an attack. Now, I don't mean to take the wind out of these Spinosaurus' sails, but you know, this isn't necessarily the best looking interpretation of Spinosaurus that we've seen here today, but nonetheless, I love their movement. I love how they look like powerful speedboat swimmers. Still, super cool movie monster. It's what you get. I am gonna point out though that I thought we all agreed that we weren't going for the super fast swimmer style anymore. Like, you're a little behind. There's been so much interpretation of Spinosaurus and the specimens we've got of it. And you know what? I'm glad we don't know what Spinosaurus looked like for sure. It's fun that we get to keep unveiling little piece by little piece, unraveling this mystery, and even rethinking old concepts that we used to have. It keeps everyone wondering, what if? For over 100 years, Spinosaurus has kept us guessing and fighting over what we think it must have looked like. So, who do you think would win? T-Rex or Spinosaurus? Or this 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 Spinosaurus? So, what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments, and make sure you stick around till the end to see some of my favorite speculative biology reconstructions of Spinosaurus. Thanks for watching, and see you around. Hi guys, I just want to introduce you to this very amazing reconstruction of Spinosaurus, dubbed Spinosaurus, and I feel like everyone just needs this in their life, because my life is better knowing that somebody created this.
In 2012, an artist named Rodrigo Vega submitted this wonderful rendition of Spinosaurus to a speculative biological art project called All Yesterdays. He imagined it as a rather mammalian-looking creature. In 2013, an artist going by Yolt on DeviantArt ran with a proboscis concept. But we got Spinosaurus, and it is beautiful. It was a cheeky take on speculative biology being pushed too far, but it was embraced across the internet. The penultimate evolution of this beast appeared with Chris Mazda creating a full 3D model of Spinosaurus. Speechless. Chef's kiss. Spinosaurus vulgaris. This concept came before the big publication of the new skeleton in 2014. So sometimes it really is life that sort of imitates art. I, for one, can't wait to see what's next.